Hey, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Tyler Huffstetter. I work here for MaintainX on the partnership side. Welcome to the Wrench Factor, where we explore the technologies and innovations shaping the future of industrial asset management. Today, we're going to be discussing some of the biggest challenges facing our frontline professionals. We're going to share some insights from the field and strategies on how to achieve best-in-class operations. One of the great things about this time of year is that companies and teams all around the world have really evaluated what they did in 2024, and they're looking forward to 2025. They've developed their strategies, and now they're looking to go out and implement it. So in today's conversation, we're going to be discovering some of the common mistakes businesses make when managing asset costs, the role of predictive and condition-based maintenance, and actionable steps companies can take to align maintenance practices and with their financial goals. I'm joined by a friend of mine, Joel Thibert, who is based up in Quebec. I've had the opportunity to work with Joel in a number of capacities over the years, and so let me bring Joel in. Joel, how are you doing today?
Great to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here because you've had one of the most exciting career paths that I can imagine. You've seen all sorts of businesses from your prior role to your current role. You've been able to go out and solve real problems for your clients. Maybe if you could just give us 30 seconds background on who Joel is for our broader audience.
Absolutely. So actually, thanks for inviting me. Super, always great to share some of those insights. 10 years of consulting in exactly this field, which is getting clients to reach their full potential in terms of ops and maintenance. A lot of it really focused on asset management and maintenance practices. And so from that, what I've learned is exactly what you're describing. Like what does it mean to be on this journey to world class in terms of maintenance and reliability? What are the common mistakes? What are the basic things that everyone needs to do that are just I'd say basic requirements versus things that are more nice to have versus things that aren't actually that helpful. And then that's led me to a role at Hydro Québec, which is our biggest integrated utility in Canada, where I oversee integrated resource planning. But what that really means in concrete terms is what do we need to invest for the next 15, 25 years to not only increase the reliability of our grid, but also increase our capacity by two, essentially, right? Our ambition is to double our capacity over that time. And so super exciting because I'm able to take a lot of those learnings from the field, but also the subtleties of getting that balance right between growth and sustaining, and when is it time to replace an asset, and how do you balance that with maintenance strategies in the field.
Joel, you're very humble in talking about this. You've solved some really big problems for your clients, and had you not gone in, perhaps those businesses would not be operating where they are today. So I encourage folks to connect with Joel here on LinkedIn or reach out in the future. So let's drill into some of this. I want to make sure that we maximize your time and some of the audience's time here. So at this particular stage of the year, as companies are looking at how maintenance can impact their bottom line, how does effective maintenance management directly impact the company's cash flow and overall financial performance?
So, the obvious answer that most people kind of probably already know is that maintenance is usually a big ticket item for asset intensive industries, mining, pulp and paper, chemicals. So if you increase asset productivity by 30% or by 20%, you might reduce your OPEX by 5 to 10%. So it is, the basic point is by increasing productivity, by limiting rework, you're just freeing up cash. The more complicated answer, I think, is that maintenance, when done well, when maintenance strategies are effective, you're actually increasing safety, quality, customer satisfaction, employee experience, and other things as well. And I just want to tell a quick story here. One of the last clients I served, the entire business case around implementing a CMMS and kind of really stepping up their maintenance was employee retention. Like the cost of turnover for this company was so high. Maintenance techs are especially difficult to recruit in this context. We all know this. All large industrials are facing the same problem. And for them, we could, the hundreds of thousands of dollars, even the millions of dollars to be invested in this made sense for the CFO, because it would reduce considerably the cost of hiring new employees, training them. But to be honest, all of the downtime caused by having new employees always learning and being on the learning curve. Another another way of thinking about it, and this is for companies that are, let's say, more strapped in terms of cash, is just extending the life of your assets that you have, right? One mining company, one of the best in the world, but really started out not being on top, and really devised a strategy to extend the life of their trucks and shovels and large assets, like 2, 3, 4 times past what the OEM thought was possible.
Yeah.
And that's really put them in a very competitive position. Of course, the first year you do this, you may not capture the full benefits, but if you foresee that you're in a cycle of 3, 4 years where you're going to be strapped for cash, that's something that you should start implementing now.
Yeah, so operations teams are always told to do more with less, right? And so they have to go out and sweat the asset, so to speak. They have to be able to get another year, get another 2 years out of that particular asset. And there's only one effective way to do that, and it's through
Yes.
through consistency on your maintenance programs. As we look at that, what are some ways, or how can predictive maintenance and condition-based maintenance really help the business on that, reduce unexpected downtime and those unexpected expenses that come up?
So this is interesting, right? Because of course, been helping clients with this for a decade, and now I'm doing it at my own, in my own organization. And like the simple thing I would say here is that at least we are, and I know others are, very capacity constrained. So it's there was a time where there let's say, labor reductions because economically it just didn't make sense to have the size of the organizations we had. I think that's kind of flipped today, as we have a lot of maintenance and projects to realize and just too few people to do them. And so the onus on our ops people is to do the right work at the right time, and only that work. And because essentially we're constrained by labor power. And so that, in a nutshell, in my mind, is how we should think of condition monitoring and predictive maintenance. It isn't primarily, in my opinion, except in some cases, to avoid that one catastrophic failure that happens once every 2 years. Sure, in some businesses, that's what makes most sense. But in most businesses, it's actually to ruthlessly prioritize work every day to make sure you're spending those valuable man hours on the most important job. And it's getting to a point where, yes, you have a plan. Of course, we all know that having a plan is key, right? And it's one of the fundamentals of maintenance. But to be open to prioritizing the things you had planned, based on what's really happening in the asset. So what I would say is, like, don't chase the really shiny, very sophisticated predictive maintenance model first. Do that, after you've actually established a consistency in getting data from the asset, interpreting it, and making sure every day that you're spending your very valuable hours on the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you consider the predictive side and using some technology, but really kind of getting simple, right? Let's get simple to the technology stack that we might use in order to monitor an asset, and identifying where to distribute the workforce
Yes.
as quickly and efficiently as possible. So you have the job of 10 people, but only 7 that can do it. You can't be spending time running from machine to machine, from production line to production line, anticipating, hey, is this going to break? Instead, you have to work with the machines. You have to connect to them, and in order to trigger the workflows appropriately off of them.
And I think like a quick story here that would be interesting is, and it's a success story, but it starts with a failure. This one client we worked with for years, trying to help them, essentially improve maintenance on their trucks. This is of mining clients. And it took us a little while to realize that, when we did those very fancy predictive models for, let's say, a particular component of a particular model of truck, we would develop a model and quickly realize that a lot of the variables were environmental. It was road condition. It was, it was humidity, atmospheric, like things that are, first of all, you can't control. So you can still obviously predict what the failure is going to happen. But of course, as those conditions change, then your model becomes less predictive, right? Whereas when we started saying, you know what, let's restart and then just have a very, very effective dashboard where we every day tell you, or every week, which truck shows signs of being or is the least healthy in terms of its overall maintenance. That's the one you should call into the shop first. And that had much more impact, because very quickly it became obvious that the models are good enough today that they can sometimes predict that something's wrong without being able to tell you exactly what. And so if you don't spend, you can get a lot of the value of, really doing condition monitoring, predictive maintenance, without necessarily doing that last 10 to 15% of the modeling, which is so expensive. Okay. So the message is, to your point, Tyler, like, use the data you have, use it well to ruthlessly prioritize to make sure that you really distribute the workforce in the most effective manner.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about the workforce and when we think about the human resources that we have to deploy against the problem, and in particular this time of year, we have to be creating that strategic plan for us to go out and execute and prosecute the problems. And if you're not being ruthless in that, as you put it, if you're not creating that plan, then you're planning to fail, right? And what happens too often is from what I've seen, and you've probably seen it too from your consulting background, is that oftentimes there's a lot of complex solutions that get thrown out there immediately, and all of these other workflows, and instead of just getting simple and just let's narrow it down to the asset performance, and where do I need to distribute the team, instead of long, complex problems that take 12 months to roll out.
So I love that you bring up that point, Tyler, because one of the most common mistakes is to go for the shiny object. So the really sophisticated condition monitoring system when you don't even have a planning system in place. And of course, I'm going to preach to the choir here, but it starts with planning, scheduling well. If you don't have that, then, the rest that I just described, like reprioritizing every day, isn't possible, right? So it starts with being really good at essentially putting the right person on the right job, understanding that, how long does this job really take, which nowadays CMMS are able to help you with, right? Because you have real time stamps that are able to really understand what gets in the way of, doing work efficiently. If you don't have that basis, so that, those fundamentals, it's really hard to do the rest. So, and so having a solid plan, a plan that you're able to let's say, question, challenge, and reprioritize over time. But, having that sort of that basic hygiene of understanding what your task times are, and then challenging those over, and having kind of a continuous improvement cycle to make them as efficient as possible. Having kind of all of that job library in your CMMS, those things are simply unavoidable. Like, you have to do them before you can really do the rest. And I know that it can be daunting, right? And I think the message is, start with the most important jobs. Like you have to get started somewhere. Start with those critical jobs that cannot be skipped, right? Your critical PMs and so on. But don't think that you have to get everything right before you start the CMS implementation. That's the other message is, in maintenance in general, I would say, use what you have to start, right? And if you have only a 30% of the job that have really good job plans, then use that as your first kind of material that you're going to implement, into your CMMS, and then build over time. Because I think that's probably the second mistake. First mistake, jumping to the shiny object. Second mistake, thinking you need to have everything perfect before you get started. That is, absolutely not true. I think what I've seen at many clients is I've seen both, right? I've seen people waiting forever, and then when they get it perfect, they realize it's really hard to implement all at once because they haven't learned from the experience.
That's right.
But also others that have just started with, let's say, 15 PMs and say, okay, we're going to start with that, and then really seeing impact for there, from just focusing on your critical jobs.
Look, I would rather see someone go out and execute really strongly against an 80% solution, and then come back and make those refinements as they go, than trying to let a perfect solution that in reality is not perfect. They're going to discover all the holes and errors, and spending the months and months and months planning for that in order to delay progress, right? I think if somebody can deploy today, they're teaching and they're learning today, and they're able to bring that back to their team and make those refinements as they go, I think that that's typically the best way in order to go forward. One of the challenges that I saw working on the industry side, and then probably you saw working with your clients, is that too often folks try to do these multi-year implementations or multi-year plans, and they're starting in this back office where they're trying to get a little bit more juice out of a workflow here, or they're trying to improve some accounting flow on the back instead of focusing on the assets that produce cash flow. And how do we help these pieces of equipment perform better and operationally standardize ourselves across all the locations? That way we can bring back to the back office, we can flow the right data back to our back office team, and they can then work on the appropriate aspect of the business, right? So I think starting with the frontline team, the team that's touching cash flow, the team that is touching the assets that it's producing cash flow, and making sure that production continues all the time. As we look at some of these paths forward for companies, we discussed some of the common mistakes that companies are making, but for companies just starting to really think about their strategies and for the rest of the year, where would you put some of these strategies for them? And if you were maybe in your own job right now, like how are you thinking about that?
So for sure, look, I mean, as you can imagine, so our grid, I mean, we're one province in, a country that's smaller than the US, but still we have 300,000 kilometers of distribution lines and something, 100,000 of, transport. So it's still a massive grid that we have to, and much of it is coming to, the end of its, let's say, OEM defined life. So the temptation is to say, let's completely ignore the places that aren't acting up. Sorry. Because we can afford to stretch those assets a little bit more. And I think doing that without a fact base is dangerous, right? So we need to, short-sightedness, just kind of kicking the can down the road is not a good idea. Sure, sometimes you can stretch assets, past, let's say, when they're due for an inspection or replacement, but do so understanding the real risk, right? And having a slightly, like, we can always do better than simply ignoring the assets that haven't failed for a while. Like that's, I would say, is a common mistake, typically not made by people in the maintenance field, made more by financial types. Without with all due respect to my colleagues, I think our job is to just bring the data to say, well, I'm okay with prioritizing, as we said, let's do it well, right? Let's not just assume that because something hasn't failed in a while that it's doing really well, that its health is actually is good. Second, I would say, is the tech first. We're in the world, everyone's been bombarded with like digital transformations and so on. I would say it's asset and people first, right? Not tech first. So it's a little bit what you said. The end user needs to be the center of this, and you need to really listen to the asset. Think in terms of what is eating your lunch, right? I mean, it's simple. And the third is impatience. Some of it will pay off quickly, as the example I gave you, like ruthlessly prioritizing where you spend your maintenance dollars, I think does that. But some of this stuff takes a bit longer to pay off. Like if you want to, use condition monitoring to extend asset life, so be patient and connect with people in the field that have done it, because often that's what CFO types want to want to see. They don't want to be the first to try something. So there are lots of examples of people who've done successfully done this, and so you need to teach patience to other people in the organization. This pays off, not necessarily in 1 year.
Yeah. Look, thank you for joining us today, Joel. I think if there's something that we can summarize here, is just the old adage here of if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I think that here we start with the end users. Here we have to think about the technology and the asset first mentality of what you just mentioned, right? So focusing on the end user, focusing on the asset that's touching our cash flow, that's touching our production. We're going to transform that. We're going to deploy the tools necessary to do it. And we're going to use tools that can give us that predictive ROI. And speaking of ROI, for any of the audience in the comments section, and then also in the posting itself, we do have an ROI calculator. And if you'd like to connect with Joel and learn more about him, please reach out to him here on LinkedIn, or reach out to myself and I'll get you connected with him as well. But thank you so much, Joel, for joining us. You have an awesome career path. I'm so excited for you and what your future holds here with Hydro Québec, and look forward to speaking again offline.
Of course. Thanks.
Thank you.